Good morning, everyone. I think it's fair to say that Gerardo and I are both really honored to be able to share this session with you this morning. I feel I was so inspired by yesterday. I was on the edge of tears half the day. My heart's like wide open. I'm here with my recently graduated daughter. I hold myself accountable as seeking to be a good ancestor, which is a bit of why I do this work. So it was amplified by being able to be here with my daughter, and she's here today as well. So I just want to thank all of you for the work that you're doing in the world and that you're aspiring to do in the world. And we've set up this session, as Gerardo was outlining, to share with you some of what we've been learning about how to do collaboration better. Now, I just want to note the irony that we have to remember how to collaborate when it's actually been a core element of our very survival. Vanessa was mentioning indigenomics putting human values back into economics. You could argue reminding ourselves how to collaborate is bringing human values into our everyday interactions, be they with our colleagues, with our families, with our communities, or in the systems that we work within, which is the domain that we Reos Partners are often invited into. And just on the vocabulary element, so in some ways we know these are fractals of one another, right? Who we are at home is often who we are in our systems, and vice versa. We're bringing our love and our experiences and points of view everywhere we go. But in our work, we're privileged to work with change makers all over the world. One of my current clients, for example, is the Building Decarbonization Coalition in the US, and their mission, they're seeking to get all buildings off of fossil fuels and onto redistributed energy or other sources, just for example. And so they are literally trying to change and transform a whole system. And of course, that takes a lot of things, but they already have in their name, coalition, right? How are we going to do this together? No one knows how to do it. No expert can solve it, nor can one or two people in the system decide to do it. Whole systems have to shift. And so what we're going to be outlining with you today, and of course we don't have a whole day workshop, we'll be summarizing, but giving you some opportunities to engage with one or two of our tools, and then you're invited to use those in the conversations that will follow in the breakout groups, okay? So I think I've set to you the call to action, but I'll just remind you that I think for most people, when you think collaboration, how many people are going to get really excited when you say, it's time to collaborate? Show of hands. All right, some of you. But for the most part, I think there's resistance because it's not easy. We've had our frustrations. It feels time consuming. Maybe it hasn't borne the vision that we had for it. And so our contention is there's no not collaborating for us to be addressing all of the poly crisis, all of the stuck systems. I literally say we're drowning in complex challenges these days, right? And so we must collaborate, but we urgently need to sort out how to do it better. And so on this question of collaboration, I just wanted to invite you in this recipe for collaboration. Is this a good one for collaboration? We want to focus on the good and harmony of the team. We want to focus on agreeing the problem, the solution, and the plan. And we want to focus on what people need to do. Now, we've got a quick poll here using Slido. And so if you want to use your phone, you can either just use the QR code, and that should get you to the poll immediately. If that doesn't work for you, then you can alternatively join at slido.com and input that number. Okay, so it looks like so far 85% say, yep, that looks like a pretty good recipe for collaboration. 15% are somewhat skeptical. Numbers are increasing. All right, well, thank you very much. And I don't actually like rewarding the skeptics, but in this case, you're right. No, it's not a good recipe for collaboration, or it's only a good recipe under certain circumstances. There we go. So that's a decent recipe under what we might call conventional collaboration. But the circumstances where that's going to work are actually fairly rare. So it's a circumstance most likely within internal organizations where the problem you're trying to collaborate around is not very complex. I would argue not even that complicated. where there's not a high degree of conflict and where there's a degree of control. As you might say, so degree of control, not high level of conflict. How many situations in our lives have those characteristics, right? Alas. So thus, we have a colleague, Adam Kahane. Some of you may have heard about him before. He's one of the founders of Reos Partners. He's written quite a number of really stellar, I think, seminal for our field books. We're really indebted to him. And part of the work that we're speaking to today stems from this book, Collaborating with the Enemy, How to Work with People You Don't Agree With, Like, or Trust. It's an extremely good read, and what we're going to provide to you today is an initial summary of that. Now, this was written at least 5 years ago now, and we have since done a lot of iterations on them, including this one called Radical. We've applied it to climate action in particular, Radical Collaboration to Accelerate Climate Action. And lucky for you, there's a whole bunch of books that will be on the table outside the door at the break, and you can pick up your own copy. And we've expanded the model somewhat since this first book, and this is particularly applied to climate action. So you're welcome to that. If there are no books, where it's available in PDF online, and I think we can probably make sure that that PDF is shared with you after our event. So honoring our elder Adam for his amazing work. And so here's that. I've already outlined our call to action, right? Increasingly everywhere, there's a call to collaborate in circumstances of high conflict and low control. And what we're presenting, we characterize as 3 stretches at minimum that we must move to away from conventional collaboration. And why a stretch? Because in the most part in our bodies, they're going to feel like we're having to stretch beyond what is comfortable and habitual. And I'll just say that conventional collaboration works, as I was noting before, where it's not that complicated. What we're calling radical collaboration, and radical meaning a kind of collaboration that gets at the root of issues, right? That's why we'd want to do it, because we're trying to get to root cause, not just putting a shine on what's existing. And so on this question of when it comes to radical collaboration and how we collaborate, how we relate with our collaborators, the stretch is that we have to embrace connection. Yes, we need connection, but we also have to embrace the conflict. A lot of us would prefer to be conflict avoidant. We know that doesn't work. What is conflict? Conflict is merely very different points of view on what we should be doing and how we might be thinking. And those are the seeds, and this is a session called the Seeds for Collective Action. The seeds are in the wisdom of the crowd. The seeds are on us mutually understanding each other's perspectives so that we can use those perspectives to understand what's actually afoot, and based on that, move ahead on identifying, well, how are we going to get at root cause and something that's actually useful here? Which brings me to the stretch number 2, which is how we advance our work, right? So it would be great if we could always agree on the problem and the solution, but for the most part, a lot of the complex challenges that we're dealing with on the planet right now, we've not seen them ever before. There's no best practice to take off a shelf somewhere, and even if there is, there's no you must experiment with, well, how is that applicable in our context? How is that applicable through the lens of the various perspectives that we've come to learn are extremely important for how we're going to apply this in our own setting? And so this experiment our way forward is a short statement for a broader process of saying, look, we have to feel our way forward. We have to get at root cause. We call it identifying leverage points. So where are those areas in your system change where you can apply the least amount of effort and have the most impact? Because we could waste a lot of time if we're working on the wrong things. And then even there's disciplined approaches to experimentation. We teach those in our processes. There's even just the spirit of that in our mind. You can feel how that's a shift in the muscles in our brain, right? Oh, we just have to try things out. The other great thing about experimenting your way forward is you don't all have to agree on what you're going to experiment on. The point is, the different people have different perspectives on what the solution is. Awesome. Go experiment about it and come back to us with what you've learned. And we can give you feedback on it. We can give each other feedback and learn together. And then collectively, you could see how you could be iterating that way. So again, in our work, we talk about creating a portfolio of promising ideas. And then we keep working on those together and learning together and slowly making our way forward. So there isn't in some ways what we want under conventional, all the usual strategic planning stuff, right? What's our vision, and then what are our objectives, and then let's figure out what the plan is and let's execute. That's not helpful. That's actually a huge distraction when we're addressing these complex challenges. And it often means that you're giving short shrift to important voices in the system. You can argue that's white supremacy in action in a lot of systems. The radical collaboration is how are we dismantling that in the way that we organize ourselves? How are we dismantling that in the way we think about whose voices should be heard or who gets to decide? So the experimentation and giving each other feedback and being in a learning process and seeking to listen to each other, that's what we found is the only way that actually could work. And then finally, how we as individuals participate. Of course, Adam Kahane, who's, if you ever saw him speak to this item, he'll talk about how that really in conventional collaboration, we're not actually collaborating. Our point of view is that all of you aren't thinking about this properly. My view is the right one, and I'm going to tell you how we should do it, right? Or I don't have to change, but you should all change, so we can just solve this thing and move on with it, right? Whereas in radical collaboration, the key move is that you have to recognize the only thing that you have agency to change is yourself. And so the key move here is, how am I contributing to the thing that we're trying to solve? And often it's deeply embedded in our mindsets. It's deeply embedded in just what our attitude might be. And there's that expression in the 60s, if you're not part of the solution, what is it? I always get it backwards.
You cannot be part of the problem. You're not part of the problem, you cannot be part of the solution.
Right, which is actually backward to what we're talking about here. What we're saying is, if you don't see that you're part of the problem, you actually can't be part of the solution. Because it brings a dishonesty. It's not bringing an analysis of, well, what is the stance you're bringing? What might you be perpetuating? What conscious or unconscious bias might you be applying that needs to be undone so that we can move forward together? Well, so we only have time today to give you a sort of flavor for getting into what we call shift number 1, which is embracing conflict and connection. And I guess what I want to just say further on this, what we've learned is that, if you want, the core technology of collaboration is actually how we talk and listen. And so in a moment, I'm going to have you participate in an exercise that is around a framing that we call the 4 ways of talking and listening. But you can see, like, radical collaboration requires us to alternate between engaging, which is like seeking to connect, but also asserting, like saying what you think is true, saying what you think is important, because that chunk of wisdom is needed for broader understanding before we can move forward. And so in a lot of our work, we have, again, in typical strategy or planning, there's some assumption about what the problem is, and we jump to problem solving. In systems change work and in radical collaboration, we understand that we actually have to spend time creating a common understanding of what the problem actually is. And we actually call it a problematic situation because of that. And so just sinking into that together and creating that space to hear from different perspectives, and then learning from there, what are the promising ideas? That's what this is speaking to. So again, creating the spaces for individuals to feel safe, to feel not only safe, but like those perspectives are essential to our ability to move forward together. And so there's this almost a dance between the asserting perspectives and wanting to stay connected. So again, in a lot of our work, it's very strong emphasis on relationship building and connection, because Peter Senge, who's a guru in our field, said that system change is really only the transformation of relationships. And so investment in building relationship, building greater mutual understanding, which a longer term outcome of that is building trust, is, you can feel it. It's an essential ingredient for how we're going to move forward together. So, 4 ways of talking and listening. After we do this exercise, I'll give you a deeper dive into this framework. But how this is going to work is we want you to, in a moment, stand up. And I know it's kind of squishy, so you'll be standing up for about 15 minutes. So if you can, I want you to stand up and be in a pair. And we're going to walk through these 4 ways of talking, listening in a kind of messy vitality conversation. And so we'll do a little bit of role playing. Introverts, don't worry, it's going to be fun. I get it. But find yourself in a pair, and I'll give the instructions in a moment. If the aisles are very wide. If you prefer to stay seated, of course, you're most welcome to. We might be moving arms around, and that can definitely work as well. Quiet fox time. Thank you, Vanessa, for the quiet box. We'll be using this repeatedly so I can get your attention each time. All right, so we're going to go through this exercise. And the topic that you'll be discussing is this one. All businesses should be B Corps, okay? So that's your topic. And the first kind of talking and listening, so there's 4, downloading, debating, empathic dialogue, and generative dialogue. There's no baddies and no overt goodies. They each have their purpose. So we're just going to have an embodied experience of these. So for this, I'm going to ask one of you to start by saying the truth is. And I want you to just go for it, right? Just be that person in your life who talks like this and just embody that. And just be, the truth is, all B Corps in the world, all companies in the world should be B Corps because da 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 da, right? And so the first person, just go on your rant. This is about speaking and listening, or talking and listening. So in this case, this listener is probably only semi-listening, right? So it's not a dialogue, it's a mutual kind of just talking. But remember this stance, I want to see a lot of pointy fingers. And I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, so you have about 1.5 minutes to be compelling to each other, trying out the downloading stance. Is that clear enough? And have a good time. All right, go. If you can begin to wrap up those conversations. I really hope this isn't offensive to any culture on the planet, but I love doing this together. So firstly, I didn't see quite enough pointing fingers for mine, so just like really go for it. I know it feels weird, but we're trying to embody a stance. I'm going to give you just about another minute to just debrief with your partner. What did it feel like in your body to be in that downloading, both talking and listening? Just to reflect on that for a minute or two. Go ahead. Please wrap up. Thank you. All right, we are now going to move to the next type of talking and listening, which is debating. And not surprisingly, this is the stance I want to see you all in, so fully go for it. Now, in this case, because it's a debate, you'll decide between you. One of you is in favor of this assertion, right? All businesses in the world should be B Corps, and the other is opposed. And so just go back and forth. One of you makes your art, like really go for it. Like really be in the why you think your position is the answer on the planet, and that the other has no grounding, but be in this kind of like closed skeptical stance to their point of view. Sound clear? Yeah, and so I'm hoping you're switch. In this case, it's more of a dialogue, but just makes you switch back and forth. We'll do that for about 3 minutes. All right? Let's see those arms folded. Wrap up your conversations. Wrap up your conversations, please. Okay, so we're going to do the debrief. Excellent, saw lots of arms crossed, makes me really happy. So we'll take a minute, just a quick exchange with each other to debrief. Well, what did that feel like for you? And again, the purpose of this is that we just want you to be embodying how you be when you're in these different conversation and listening modes. Because I think, as we were saying, mindset is so much a part of our work in trying to collaborate effectively, okay? So a debrief on what was that like for you, being in the debate mode. in your mind and your body, your heart. Off you go. Time to wrap up. Time to wrap. All right. So the next type of talking and listening is what we call empathic dialogue. And so this is really the stance where your hand on heart helps, because in essence, you know, where is the source of our empathy? One source is definitely our hearts. And so the idea here is to be present to what the person you're talking to is saying with a stance of curiosity. So moving from the debate, which is often judgment, to, well, why is this person saying what they're saying? So seeking to understand. So again, the sentence stub there is, in my experience, ... and then make your arguments in that fashion. Sound good? Hand on heart, in my experience, empathic dialogue. Have a good time. Please wrap up your conversations. All right, as is our pattern, I'm going to give you about a minute to debrief that, right? So what did it feel like to be in this empathic dialogue, to be speaking from your heart and to be listening with curiosity? Please wrap up your conversation. All right, now we're into talking and listening mode number 4. That we call generative dialogue. And so this is that kind of dialogue that is more rare. You've probably maybe experienced it. Sometimes it's called the flow state. And that's that feeling sometimes like you're in that kind of brainstorm mode or in a real creative space with others, when it feels like the best idea is literally like rising from the middle of the room or coming down from the heavens or wherever it's coming from. But it's not coming from individuals. It's coming almost from your collective effort. Right? So in this case, the stance is open, and the sentence stub is, what I'm noticing here and now is. So you can be referencing the conversations you had before, but same topic, switch back and forth, 3 minutes, have fun. Please wrap up that conversation. Please wrap up. All right, so you've just had an experience of the 4 ways of talking and listening. And before I give you more details about that framework, and we won't pause to just debrief generative dialogue, I'm going to ask you to just think about all 4 modes and in this question. You know, what did you notice that shifted as you moved through the 4 ways of talking and listening? And notice that in your body and your mind and your heart as receiver and as well as speaker. Okay, we'll take about 3 minutes for this debrief with your partner. Oh, thanks everyone. I'll invite you to take your seats again. Thank your partner. Thank your partner. Take your seats. All right, so just a reminder, why did we do that? In case there were people that walked in the room in the middle of that messy vitality. Talking and listening, core technology, core social technology of life, one might argue, but in particular for collaboration. And the reason why we find this framework so helpful is that if as a group you're already aware and can be personally conscious of, well, what kind of talking and listening are we doing right now? And is this a good one to be employing right now? So I'm going to start lower left with downloading. Again, back to there's no good or bad. Downloading is a bit of what I'm doing right now, right? So teaching in an emergency, you want the person that knows what to do to be downloading. There's a time and a place. It's a mode of speaking, a mode of listening. Debating is also extremely important, right? So often we have a lot of polarization in our world these days. And one hypothesis is because we actually don't have spaces for people to feel like they actually have been heard. And so then people just yell louder. And often people seem irrational, but they're mostly irrational after they haven't been heard 100 times. And so part of our work as facilitators of collaboration, as humans, is to be curious. It's like, why does this person feel this way? And to seek to understand. That's what we need, and that's what we'd all want that ourselves. So in a collaborative effort, we try to create spaces through various modes for those diversity of opinions to be expressed and to be heard. So it's both, you can see in this case where talking gets all the attention, but actually it's listening that is the power move, right? How much do we take in? How are we employing our curiosity and allowing that really to inform us and to change our minds, to change the decisions we might make? Don't you agree we need that at scale right now? And can you feel in your own body how I feel like some days I have a natural resistance, like the first move is resistance, and I actually have to consciously tell myself to open and be curious, right? So debating is really important. And it would be nice if we could get to empathic dialogue like that, but for the most part, that's not the world, right? Often we'll need debating so that we can get to empathic dialogue. And then usually you need to have relationship with people at the empathic dialogue level for the generative dialogue to be possible. One of the things that we like to emphasize, because you might be saying, well, how do we get from debating to empathic dialogue? One way is storytelling. When instead of being in debate, we invite people to tell their stories, to tell stories of where they are and where they came from. We heard a lot of that yesterday, right? People being able to relate to other people as people and not just their issue or the thing that they've been in lifelong advocacy to is one mode for helping to move from debate to empathic dialogue. You'll notice the word here, suspending. The other move, especially on the listening side, is literally this idea, like I was saying, if I feel that resistance, whatever that might be, or maybe I'm super busy and distracted because I have some other deadline, all those things that might prevent me from really showing up so I can be in empathic dialogue, we call that mood suspending. So literally taking that and like putting it over here for 5-10 minutes so we can be fully present and take full advantage of the kind of conversation we're in. And then that also then creates the possibility for generative dialogue. You'll notice on the y-axis, it says what we've also learned is that if we're in downloading and debating mode, we're mostly referencing the past. When we're in empathic dialogue and generative dialogue, that's where the space of new ideas. That's where we're inviting the future to inform us. And we would say, why do we collaborate? We say the purpose of collaborating is collaborative innovation. So that's where the space of collaborative innovation can actually occur. So I hope you found that helpful. I'd love to see a show of hands for, was that helpful? I've seen the, okay, whoop it up, yeah, all right. So I'm only naming that because we really wanted to give you something we thought was really helpful. And I think one of the more powerful tools that is helpful across spectrums. And I just wanted to leave you with that image, literally, what do I need to suspend to do my best work? I think it's a question that we'll often go into meetings with that reminds us about what might be in the way of being able to do our best work.